What's up, guys? I needed to jump on because I didn't think a simple play could be completely shifting a playoff series, but that's exactly what's happening. The Knicks are running a simple flex screen play, and the Hawks and Quinn Snyder have just been unable to figure out how to stop it. So in this video, I want to break down exactly what's going on, why this play is so effective for the Knicks, why the Hawks have been unable to figure out a way to stop it, and what are some solutions that need to be explored before it's too late for the Hawks. And I want to start off by going over why it's so effective. So it starts off with Towns, right? Cat is a good passer, a good decision maker, and that's his role right here in this play, reading the flex screen. The next key part of it is Brunson. Brunson is a screen setter, and that's a player you cannot leave. And then finally, the real key to this play is OG Anunoby, because him going to the basket is such a huge threat, but underrated is actually he's one of the best corner three-point shooters in the league. So if you try and cheat this play, well, you might be leaving him open at one of the most deadly spots on the floor. And I want to drive home how important the personnel is in this play, because in the NBA, it's not really so much the action, it's who's running the action. And so you can see when the Knicks aren't using Brunson and OG, this is a lot easier for the Hawks to guard. Right here, they're able, with Bridges and Hart, just to switch it and neutralize an advantage. And then again, they try and run the play with Bridges as the screener, but you can see they're just much more willing to help off of Bridges. You can see CJ really getting detached from Bridges here, helping on this cut against OG as much as possible. Whereas if this was Brunson over here, well, we would not be leaving him at all. So matchups play a huge role in this play. And honestly, the Hawks don't have the roster to make this play switchable for them. Because if you think about it, well, Brunson's setting the screen. Well, who can guard Brunson and also switch on to OG going to the basket? Really, the only player that can do that is Dyson Daniels, who's done a phenomenal job in games 3 and 4 at guarding Brunson in isolation and has the size and versatility to switch on to OG going to the basket. But then the question is, well, who can guard OG and then switch on to Brunson? Because that's a harder question to ask. It's not going to be Okongwu. They don't want Okongwu or Jalen Johnson switching on to Brunson in isolation. And so really the only player they have that can guard OG and then switch onto Brunson is, well, Dyson Daniels. And the Hawks unfortunately don't have two of him. They only have one of him. So now this action is becoming really hard to figure out and almost is unswitchable for the Hawks, which is why they're struggling so much with it. Now, Game 4, the Knicks really ran this action a ton and got a huge amount of success and obviously won that game to tie the series. So Game 5, what did the Hawks do? What changes did they make? Well, the major adjustment we can see right from the first play when the Knicks go back to it is the matchups. They completely shifted the matchups on the floor. The first one we should look at is Dyson Daniels is now on Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is this important? Well, from a theory standpoint, Dyson Daniels guarding Cat, well, now we can put a little bit more pressure on Cat as the decision maker. Dyson Daniels, one of the best guys in the league at getting deflections, so making these passes off time, off target will be huge if that can happen. Now that leaves Nickeil Alexander-Walker on Brunson, who's been okay in this series guarding Brunson in isolation. But now the key is, well, who's guarding OG? They start with Okongwu, who has the size to match up with him, but does he have the ability to navigate these screens? And that answer is, as we're going to see, is going to be no. You can see Nickeil Alexander-Walker has to help a lot because Okongwu gets so hung up on that screen. Brunson pops wide open, and then he misses the floater here, but that's clearly not going to be a good solution if that's going to be how we guard it the rest of the game. This time we can see the impact Dyson Daniels can have in this position guarding Cat, as we have another flex screen happening here. Okongwu again gets caught up locking and trailing OG, but just Dyson Daniels' hand being here maybe forces Cat to throw a slightly off-target pass, and now it results in a turnover. So that's the upside of having Dyson Daniels guard Cat. But again, Okongwu guarding OG has been difficult to watch in Game 5. Here's a little counter the Knicks run looks like Brunson's going to set that flex screen, but then stops and sets a back screen because now OG's actually at the top of the key wing area. And again, you can see Okongwu just get separated here. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has to really disengage from Cat to make sure we're not giving up a wide open layup. Now Cat maybe, now Brunson maybe has this three, but then kicks it right back to Cat, and that's an open three as well. So the Hawks really, even with different matchups, this action is still being really hard to figure out how to guard. Again, we struggle navigating the screen. We get caught up. Now we have to help off of Brunson, and now Brunson has that kickback three, which we haven't seen yet, but is still a huge threat. And I think the most frustrating thing about watching this play and watching this series has been it seems like the only adjustment Quinn Snyder and his staff are making is, well, just try and be more physical, hug and hold. You can see here Okongwu, as this play is happening, or whoever this is, just starting to bear hug OG Anunoby and try and lock and trail more physically. And we've seen that just not be successful. And trying to beat OG with physicality doesn't seem like a recipe that's going to be easy to accomplish. Not to mention, the Hawks racked up some cheap fouls trying to defend in this physical manner. You can see a foul call here. And this really added up in the third quarter when they got into foul trouble quite quickly. So what are the solutions? Well, let's go over some of the solutions. And we're going to start with the basics on how to guard this flex screen action, because the basics might be what the Hawks need at the end of the day. So when we're looking at guarding this kind of action, this flex screen action, one of the basic principles of how to guard it is as the chaser, right? The guy guarding the cutter off of him. You should know which way you want to try and navigate this screen even before it's set as your team scheme defense. So if we want to get over this screen every time, that's going to give us a little advantage in how we position ourselves before it even comes, and then getting a jump on the screen to get over cleanly and meet them at the other side. Now, the problem is if they choose to go low, then it's just a foot race and we might get caught up on the screen. And so the screener's defender becomes pivotal here. They have to do almost the inverse coverage, because if the chaser is going over, the screener's defender has to bump and jam low to impede and slow down that cutter's movement, to buy this player who's getting over the top a little extra time to cover back up. Now, another key is that when you are jamming low, you don't want to become too disattached, because now Brunson might be getting a three. He might be coming off a handoff. So we need to stay at the level of the screen, to jam at the level of the screen, to stay connected, so that when he does shoot up off a screen or off a three or off a handoff, we can stay connected and try and take it away or stay attached. So if we go back to how the Hawks are guarding it, we can see a couple times where accidentally these kind of things happen. So if we do want to take that first principle, that first basic premise of, okay, we're going to cheat it over the top. Now you can see again, super physical from Kuminga here, grabbing and holding. This time they don't get the foul call, but Kuminga kind of gets shoved over top of the screen. And so we can imagine if our coverage was, okay, when this screen's coming, Kuminga, just stay high side like you're top blocking him, and then cheat this screen over the top. OG goes low. This time we would want Nickeil Alexander-Walker to bump OG low as he's going low to impede his path to the basket a little bit without getting too disattached from Brunson, just to buy Kuminga a little bit more time. And now we're jamming low, and we can stay attached to Brunson as much as we can as he tries to fight over the top. And then the question becomes, well, who's guarding who's guarding Cat? Because I can tell you, once Cat decides to go isolation, Bradley's not the solution. Now, of course, the downside to this kind of coverage is, okay, well, if they set it higher, then maybe OG can pop back to the three, or maybe over the top passes might be open to OG, and that's where the pressure is going to come into a huge part. And like any adjustment, there's going to be counters. So it's not necessarily that there's going to be a key solution, but we need to try something. Another idea would be to inverse that coverage. So instead of trying to cheat the play high, well, we could cheat the play low. And again, not a perfect clip because they're not executing these perfectly, but let's say Okongwu is going to sit on the high side now, on the low side now as this screen's coming, and he's just going to cheat that flex screen low. And that would mean that Nickeil Alexander-Walker, well, if OG tries to cut high, well, he would jam high and stay high, which is actually a good position to guard Brunson on the high side, trying to take away his catches or dribble handoff options. The problem with trying to cheat the play on the low side is if OG goes low, obviously we've already beaten him to that spot. But if he goes high, then he has the option to kind of flare it out. Either back to the three, which would be hard because obviously he's one of the best corner three shooters, or maybe even to the wing. Now, if we go through this mental chess match in our head, if OG does pop back to the wing, that should require an automatic switch because Nickeil Alexander-Walker should be jamming high anyway. And if he pops back high, well, that would require an immediate switch. And although that's not an ideal matchup in isolation, well, OG on the perimeter against Nickeil Alexander-Walker, as long as it's not in the post, maybe that's something we can live with. And yes, if Okongwu or Jalen Johnson or whoever is guarding OG switches onto Brunson, at least Brunson is now screening over here, and really it's going to be in the posts. So those are matchups, at least positionally wise, on the floor we can live with. Now, if Brunson decides, okay, I got this big guy on me, I need to sprint back for a handoff, well, now he's sprinting off a handoff, and now we can switch that. So now if Okongwu was on Brunson trying to deny him, now he can switch on the Cat, and Dyson Daniels can switch on the Brunson. So actually, if we execute this properly, even though OG might have the counter to pop back, we emergency switch, and now we actually might get into better switches and matchups overall. So again, just some solutions. There's always going to be trade-offs. There's always going to be counters, but we need to throw something in the works as Atlanta before it becomes too late and our season's over. Another important point as we get more tricky and off of the basics of how to guard these kind of flex screens, and even right now we see a back screen, is we have to realize the Knicks don't have 5 sharpshooters spreading the floor. I mean, we have to remember, no offense, Josh Hart has been phenomenal in this series, getting loose balls defensively, even making some key shots. But we have Josh Hart here. We don't need to be hugged up against him. He's really a non-shooting threat. And so whoever's guarding Josh Hart, usually Jalen Johnson, the start games at times, he should be more positioned to help on any flex cut, any black screen type actions, making sure we're willing to live with Josh Hart having to hit threes to beat us. And you can see they have to emergency switch this here as Jalen Johnson has a hard time navigating the back screen. And again, this isn't a matchup we would ideally want, but if we use a roamer correctly, well, even in mismatch situations, well, maybe we can scram switch it if Cat has to throw it. And now, let's say this is Jalen Johnson guarding Hart or maybe even Okongwu. Now we can switch off of that matchup or go double if they throw it into the post. And the Hawks shouldn't rule out switching and then going to double if they do post up OG because they've doubled the post before, and especially in the last game, Game 5, starting Dyson Daniels on Cat. Well, anytime the Knicks threw it into the post to attack Dyson Daniels with that matchup, they went immediately into a double team on Cat. And again, you can see you're able to rotate, especially off of Hart, to cover up mistakes that might happen in rotation. Again, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is helping a little bit more on OG, and they throw it, and that's something we're willing to live with, that wide open three from Josh Hart, especially when it comes to not giving up these flex cut layups or flex cut Brunson touches. Again, here we have a post touch from Cat. We have the double send. Now, here's what really is the problem for Atlanta when they're rotating, right? You can see we rotate to Brunson, which we need to prioritize. We're rotating off of Hart to prioritize the shooter. But then Okongwu makes a huge mistake here. This is a mistake we cannot see from a playoff team, especially if this is going to be a do-or-die game. We cannot be running at Josh Hart, leaving one of the best corner three-point shooters in the league wide open. This needs to be a stunt and stay. Make Hart hit this three or make him drive into the rotating coverage. We cannot be giving up that shot. And the last piece of this puzzle, the last solution, is Kuminga, right? He's been hot or cold this series on both offense and defense, to be honest with you. But Kuminga is a guy who has the strength to match up with OG. And honestly, I want to see what happens if Kuminga does switch this onto Brunson and now has to switch and deny Brunson. That's something I would be interested in seeing. So if we have maybe Dyson Daniels primarily guarding Brunson, who can switch on to OG, we have Kuminga, who can now switch on to Brunson. That's a switchable type of matchups and something I would be willing to explore. Now, the problem is the Hawks usually never have Kuminga and Dyson Daniels on the floor at the same time, maybe for offensive reasons. But if the key struggle here is on defense, well, maybe it's something worth exploring. Again, all these solutions, right? Chalk talk solutions sound good. But again, there's always going to be counters. There's always going to be adjustments. So it's not about finding what's going to work perfectly. It's about having solutions to deploy. Because if maybe we go in one direction and then the next counter, well, now we can go to our second and now we can go to our third. We can maybe even pre-adjust, anticipating what they're going to do. But what we can't do is just sit back and let the Knicks keep running this play and just be frustrated that our season's about to end because we can't guard it. So I'm interested to see what Quinn Snyder and his staff and the Hawks have planned for Game 6. As always, I'm Coach Mike with Lockdown Defense. Keep up the hard work.